I'm passionate about preserving the history of Orange City.
The town of Orange City was founded here about 3 years after this was built.
We played a lot of tennis. My group did.
I never had enough money to buy a tennis racket.
Cracker women, I guess, used snuff right along with the men.
Everybody that came through here stayed at the hotel. It was quite a notable place in those days.
They, probably half the population, I would think, are retirees here in Orange City.
Stay out of politics. It will take the fire out of you.
It's fun to hear the clock strike. Bong, 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 bong.
It's a city of retirees and wage earners, I like to say. People who are, there's not a lot of affluency in Orange City. There's some, but not a lot like you see in some of the other communities around us.
The men of town bought the liquor and they drank it too.
I don't remember. And so we just went up to the Boyle. You could drive up to the Boyle free.
Mosquitoes get in the house, you'd fight mosquitoes at night.
People coming in see that this really is a very charming town.
Come on into Orange City. You're going to be successful if you live a quiet and peaceful life.
Every Wednesday we had a covered dish supper, and everybody brought a covered dish. And after the supper, and they cleaned it up, then they shoved all the chairs back and danced. And all the boys knew how to dance, and all the girls knew how to dance.
That was just life back then.
Most retirees are comfortable, let's put it that way.
Towns need character.
The town itself will always survive. It will always survive.
The founders of Orange City, Florida, had big dreams. After the Civil War, a group of Yankee pioneers from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, piled down here by steamship, convinced that oranges would make them rich. High ground, warm weather, clean water, they thought they'd found paradise. Then came the big freeze. Most lost everything. Those who stayed worked hard to keep people civilized, despite more tragedy. Yellow fever, dysentery, and malaria. Bank robberies, murder, fire, the Great Depression, and severe hunger. Many times over the last 130 years, the people of Orange City, Florida, struggled to survive. 60s and 70s, after the Civil War, northern residents were treated to the spoils of victory. Florida land, lots of it, at cut-rate prices. Thousands boarded railroads and then steamboats from places like New York, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Ohio. Among them was a small group from Eau Claire, Wisconsin. They bought 3,200 acres near Blue Spring for just $1.25 an acre. The history of many Florida towns begins with settlement by rich men from the north. Orange City was no exception. Before the Wisconsin settlers, the first colonists lived at Blue Spring. Nationally known botanist Samuel Parsons, owner of one of the nation's largest nurseries in Flushing, Long Island, came down in 1855 looking for exotic plants. He built a log cabin at the spring. At his nursery in Queens, he introduced the Japanese chestnut tree, the pink flowering dogwood, and from Belgium, the weeping European beech. A few years later, Parsons welcomed Brooklyn resident Louis Thursby, whose family became the first permanent residents of Blue Spring. They lived in Parsons' cabin while building a 3-story home of their own. Louis's wife, Mary Ann, adapted well to the frontier. Born in the Swiss Alps, Mrs. Thursby bore 10 children. After learning that her husband, a suspected Union sympathizer, was captured by the South and jailed in St. Augustine, Mary Thursby drove a team of mules 75 miles up the Black Bear Trail. Over the years, the landing became a popular place for northern scientists looking to study Florida's unusual plant life. As word spread north, the Thursbys welcomed new neighbors. Seth French was a former Union Army surgeon from Eau Claire, Wisconsin. With 5 Eau Claire acquaintances, French formed the Wisconsin Company and began carving up the land that would become Orange City. Soon they would persuade nearly 200 Eau Claire neighbors to buy land. French and his partners offered a can't-miss opportunity. They would grow oranges and ship them to northerners just learning of the health benefits of fresh Florida citrus. In place of the scrub pines they cleared, the settlers built homes, churches, general stores, livery stables, and hotels. The DeArmond Hotel was the setting for all social and official gatherings in the young town. The naming of the new town sparked one of the first of what would be many political controversies to come. At a meeting at the DeArmond Hotel, early residents argued over 2 choices.
Many people wanted the name Blue Spring because after all that was the access to the town. And Mr. Stillman, who ran a store in town, really thought that for advertising purposes it would be nice to call the town Orange City. He had quite a few groves, and those who were interested in selling the oranges thought it would be very nice to call it Orange City. Well, the vote was for Blue Spring, and that's the way it stayed. However, a little later, Mr. Stillman was in charge of seeing that the town had a post office. And of course, the post office had to have a name, and he simply submitted Orange City. So that's the way Orange City got its name.
The real estate business boomed. By 1883, the population stood at between 800 and 1,000, according to a pamphlet by real estate agents Austin Wilson and Company. The pamphlet, distributed in the North, hyped what it called the enormous profitableness of an industry infused with orange fever. Lots that for 50 years had remained vacant at $1.25 an acre, it said, now brought $50 to $100 per acre. Orange groves, the pamphlet said, could yield up to $2,000 an acre every year. With breathless exaggeration, the pamphlet trumpeted the area's climate, the behavior of settlers, the quality of education, and health prospects. The climate in July, the writer said, is not a hot climate, and more comfortable than in Washington, Quebec, and New York. Society is good, with an absence of what it called that boisterous and turbulent element found pioneering in the western states. The town, the pamphlet said, was building a first-class high school under the charter of the Orange City Collegiate Institute. Later, Orange City leaders waged a major campaign to convince the founders of Rollins College to build their campus here. Rollins was instead built in the now Tony Winter Park. The Dickinson family operated the hotel, which served as the town's primary meeting place and cultural center. Gradually, the businesses moved just north to what would become the town's Main Street.
East Graves Avenue really, in the early days, was the main street because that's where the businesses were. Today, the center of town is down on the corner of Volusia and Graves Avenue. But you see, the first stores were up this way. A boot shop, a meat market, a candy store, grocery stores, sundries.
W.W. West operated a store and city hall on the southeast corner of East Graves and Holly Avenues. Groceries were available at Charles Smith's Pioneer Store at the northeast corner of Oak and Graves. Above the store, R.E. Pravat published the South Florida Times newspaper. The name alone suggests the stature settlers believed Orange City would soon attain. Further along Graves, Cecilia Babcock ran a dress and millinery. Helen Freeman Spencer's family ran the Freeman Hotel. Life in Orange City was good.
At the height of the steamship era, there were 5 to 6 boats a day docking there. And of course they brought people, they brought goods, and eventually they took oranges from the area out to the rest of the world.
From the packing houses, the fruit was loaded onto a small, mule-driven freight car and shipped west to the river along a narrow-gauge track built by West. Children, forbidden to pick from the trees, might stand along the track and hope something would fall from the train. Orange trees lined all the streets, often butting against the growers' homes. Varieties included Parson Brown, Lou Gim Gong, Stark Seedless, Enterprise Seedless, and Hamlin. Oranges weren't the town's only claim to fame. Blue Spring was becoming well known for its clean, clear water, and Orange City sat atop the aquifer that fed the spring. Near the main road through town, C.A. Bullen drilled into that bubble and brought up water said to be 99.99% pure. Bullen formed the Orange City Water Company, which soon developed a national reputation. Customers included John D. Rockefeller, who spent his winters at Ormond Beach, about 20 miles to the northeast. The wealthy industrialist insisted on carrying his Orange City water everywhere he went, including overseas trips where he could use it in his baths. One of the town's proudest moments took place at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, when Orange City won a silver medal for its water. A small pump at the corner of Volusia and Graves Avenues provided water to anyone willing to carry it off. A fountain still exists at the site, and residents of nearby cities can often be seen filling their plastic jugs.
It's not expensive at other places, you know, further down in Florida. Secondly, you feel at home. Third, it's the people. It has reasonably good schools. It has an excellent fire department, excellent police department, excellent library facilities. So it has a lot going for it.
Orange City still has the appeal of the small town. The people are extremely friendly, and it's a good atmosphere.
People is very nice, good people here around here. Never have any problem with them, anybody.
It's my whole family from Orange City. My mom, my grandmother, my grandfather, my sister's brothers. We all grew up in one big happy home.
Never have any problem for shooting or anything. Like Orlando always happens, big town.
Just one little black community. They was very loved. They knew one another. We all consider ourselves as a big happy family in Orange City in the black community.
People pretty much leave you alone. There's not a whole lot of building covenants, so if I want to park my truck out in the front of the yard, I can do that. The people are pretty friendly. I enjoy the way that the town's starting to come together in a historical sense. Our city council is starting to come together in a very positive mode. We had lots of fun made of us in the past, but it looks like we're starting to get things under control now. And it's just a great place to live. You got good schools and good things to do here.
I live right by the lake, the house on Blue Spring by the lake, and the point there, every night we're out, we're looking for the moccasin snakes at nighttime, and then they'll kill them and try to put them on us, and me, devastated back then, of frogs. They'll run me up and down the street with frogs, and I mean, it was being a kid in our city, it was great.
It's nice, quiet. Neighbors are all friendly, and the only thing is that the traffic is getting bad. But
like I say, you know all your neighbors and the people around town. It's a lot better coming from St. Louis, where you don't know half the people. You know, it's just a better way to raise the kids, I think.
Orange City is at a point when it could go one way or the other. And right now, I think we need to get the people. We could either lose this community to a large town, or we can keep this community small. And if we push to improve our parks, get behind our children, which is our future generation, and do as much as we can for them, I think this is the future of Orange City, because Orange City years ago was so small and has become so huge that if we don't work on it, we will totally lose this city to the larger side of it.
Promoters' claims to the contrary, the town had its brushes with that boisterous and turbulent element. After railroad service linked Orange City to the rest of the state, strangers found their way there with increasing frequency. Some brought bad fortune to those unlucky enough to cross their paths. Alcohol, widely available in drugstores, was seen by many as the root of Orange City's lawlessness. In the 1870s, David Graves sold whiskey at his store for $1 a bottle. He called it the fighting kind. A temperance movement initiated by the Methodist Episcopal Church South in 1878 convinced state lawmakers to impose a $1,000 fee on liquor licenses statewide. 10 years later, Orange City voters turned out to help vote Volusia County a dry county. Still, the temperance movement in Orange City would remain active for decades to come. Of course, not everyone who enjoyed a taste of the spirits were outlaws.
No, there's plenty of liquor. The bootlegger came by and put the liquor in the garage and then got sent a check for what it was worth.
Balancing out the rougher element were the hard-working women of the town, who often worked in the groves, but made sure attention was paid to the more civilizing influences of reading, music, art, and community service.
The women had a great influence in this town. And the thing about it was, I believe, that the folks that came the women were educated, and had a lively interest in what's going on. And that's one of the reasons that they formed the Village Improvement Association.
The VIA helped build the first sidewalks and shell roads, planted trees in the town's park, and installed the first kerosene lamps. Few could have known, when the Village Improvement Association was founded in May 1894, how much the village would soon be in need of improvement. In the fall of 1894, Orange City was home to 4,000 thriving orange groves. The citrus business, while perhaps not the pot of gold promised by the early real estate salesman, provided a living for many families over the town's first 17 years. In December 1894, Florida's citrus belt was dealt a blow the town settlers had been told would never happen. The first wave of frigid temperatures arrived in December. The freeze blackened and shriveled the leaves and killed the fruit, but not the trees. The sap was driven to the twigs. After it warmed up again, orange blossoms covered the branches, and the growers hoped the damage was minimal. But in February came the killer cold wave, the Big Freeze. One of Orange City's women wrote this account.
The orange trees, with trunks a foot thick, withered and blackened and crumbled and became brittle like frozen geraniums. More and more intense became the cold. One could hear the snapping of the frozen sap and crackling of the limbs. The family did what they could. Discouraged, disheartened, yet fighting off fate, they worked like beavers far into the night.
She told of fruit piled everywhere in the house, in bedrooms, the kitchen, on stairs. Town co-founder Seth French watched helplessly as temperatures plunged. He was heard to cry, "The jig is up. The oranges in Florida are gone." The settlers did what they could to salvage what was left. One woman canned years' worth of marmalade. A man offered to trade his grove for a box of good cigars. Some shipped north as many of the useless oranges as possible before unsuspecting customers caught news of the Big Freeze. Seth French died a broken man, financially and spiritually, 11 months later, in January 1896. After the tragedy, Orange City went to sleep. Growers moved north. Years later, oak trees replaced the orange trees and became the symbol of Orange City's rebirth. The hardships of the post-freeze era and the political unease that would always be a part of life here came through in a cynical poem written in 1899 by S.C. Fuller and printed in the Orange City Times called Hail the Happy Day.
When our orange trees with fruit are once more loaded full, when all Orange City factions shall again together pull, hail the happy day. When the music suits the audience as well as it does the player, when everybody's satisfied with whoever is the mayor, oh, hail the happy day. When our city's last defamer has given his final gurgle, when the predatory burglar no more hereabout shall burgle, hail the happy day. When we have a telephone exchange, also electric light, when our men no more loaf or roam, but hasten home at night, when the gossips cease their jawing, when our beef requires less chawing, oh, hail the happy day.
Sickness and disease struck lethal blows in those first decades. No Florida town was spared. Malaria, dysentery, and fever claimed natives and northerners alike, George Parker wrote. Mr. and Mrs. Stephen Sparkman lost 5 of their 7 sons from fevers. The Thursby family lost 4 of their 10 children to illness. On top of those hardships, fire destroyed the heart of the commercial district in 1909. Helped by a strong southeast wind, flames broke out in P.W. Hill's drugstore on Graves Avenue about 2 p.m. on March 12th. The fire quickly destroyed 5 buildings on Graves and 3 more on Oak. Airborne cinders damaged houses for blocks around. Perhaps no family left as deep an imprint on the local culture or as strong an impression on fellow Orange City residents as the Dickinsons. Rich, successful, smart, and eccentric, the Dickinsons moved here from Chicago, where the 4 children of Albert F. Dickinson, Albert, Melissa, Charles, and Frances, operated the nation's largest seed company.
I'm related to Dr. Frances Dickinson. I am her great-great-great niece. Hannah Dickinson, Frances's eldest sister, is my great-great-grandmother.
Frances was a highly regarded ophthalmologist.
I have to say that she's kind of my favorite because she was such a character, and as a young woman she was very interested in the sciences. She graduated from school, went to Dearborn Seminary, and taught for a couple of years before she went off to medical school. She became a doctor, and she was active in the suffrage movement with her cousin Susan B. Anthony, and did many other just innovative things in life. And she never married either. She went on for advanced training in ophthalmology and surgery. She studied in Germany, I believe in Leipzig, and then she also studied in London. And that was truly unusual for a woman in those years. But I have to say this, and this is very personal. Susan B. Anthony had a problem with one of her eyes. And while I never really worked with ophthalmologists, I was born without an eye. And there must be something with the eyes in this family. I just, when I was younger, I always wanted to be an ophthalmologist. And then when I learned later in life, when I learned that Frances had been an ophthalmologist, I just thought, isn't this interesting? I wonder why that connection. Dr. Frances was an aviator, and she, I am told, donated land to the city, or at least took some of her land and cleared it off to form an airfield in Orange City, and she used it, and her brother Charlie used it, and certainly many other people could use it as well. And she then donated, sometime in the 30s, donated this airfield to the Betsy Ross Air Corps, which was a training group for women to train aviators, aviatrixes. And those women then, during World War II, were put into service delivering some supplies and doing some of the just air runs that they couldn't release fighter pilots for.
Brother Charles Dickinson never moved to Orange City, but flew here from Chicago in his biplane. In Chicago, he was known as the grandfather of aviation for organizing the first U.S. airmail service, funding air shows, and lending money to struggling young pilots. In Orange City, he was known for being a bit of a daredevil. Flying in to visit his sister, he would buzz the treetops, his full beard flying before bringing the plane in for a dust-kicker landing.
He was the oldest licensed pilot in the country, and I think by Aviator 79, he really was the 79th person to get his aviator's license. And he was the founder of the Illinois Aero Club. He donated the land for Midway Airport in Chicago, back when Chicago didn't have an airfield. And it was, I would guess that it was Charlie who was the inspiration for Frances to get into aviation.
Albert Dickinson, another Civil War veteran on the Union side, settled with his wife Emma in a large house west of Carpenter Avenue on a plot called Government Hill.
Melissa, who was next in line, I am told she was actually the financial brains behind the Dickinson Company. Her brother, Albert, was the president of the company, but he is quoted as saying that she ran the company. And I think her title with the Dickinson Company was secretary. She never married, and she and Albert were very close, business partners and close friends. Albert, of course, was the eldest son, and he ran the company. He was the president of the company, and he was a very well-respected citizen of Chicago and one of the founders of the Chicago Historical Society.
Albert was considered by chauffeur Ed Francis to be tightest paper on the wall.
Whenever I drive more than 25 miles an hour, he'd growl, "Don't drive so fast, that wears the tires." Thank goodness the old man used an ear horn a yard long and hardly ever heard my replies.
Melissa Dickinson was beloved by townspeople for her kind and generous spirit. After her death in 1910, Francis Dickinson wrote in a local paper that Melissa was the Gibraltar to whom all of us steered in a storm. After Melissa died, Emma convinced Albert to donate the library site and 3 adjacent downtown parcels for a new library and community park to be dedicated in Melissa's name. To make way, 3 of the town's oldest homes were moved from the site by a team of mules to the southeast block of Rose and Holly Avenues. The Brokenshires moved into one, while the Cruz family bought the other. The third home was acquired from Francis by Miss Bertha Fuller, who later deeded it to the Orange City 4-H Club under the condition that it always be used for education. Later it became home to the Extension Homemakers Club, where women perfected cooking, sewing, decorating, gardening, and other essential skills. The home was renovated in summer 2001 following a community fundraising effort and the award of the town's first state historical grant. After remaining empty for 20 years, the Alberta's Cottage is once again serving the community. The library built by the Dickinsons remains the town's social and cultural center and the setting of frequent gatherings, as well as meetings of the Library Association and Village Improvement Association. The library remains the repository of photos and artifacts from more than 125 years of Orange City history. Despite so many setbacks, Orange City grew with the rest of the state in the 1910s and 20s. Automobiles, cheap mass transportation, and a prospering economy brought middle-class Northerners in growing numbers. While the Vanderbilts and Rockefellers wintered in cities like Palm Beach, Americans of more modest means were only too happy to spend the coolest months in sleepy, picturesque Orange City. In the 1920s, Orange City found itself, with the rest of the nation, in yet another land boom. On East Graves, work began on a new, red-brick, New England-style town hall. The 2-story building would house the town marshal and justice of the peace, the town jail, and all town offices. Town council meetings would be held upstairs. The dedication of the town hall in March 1929 would be one of the last celebrations the town would enjoy for several years. That spring, contamination of Central Florida's citrus trees by the Mediterranean fruit fly brought the orange business to its knees yet again. Hoping to limit the damage, the state quarantined all citrus groves in 4 counties. The season's entire crop had to be destroyed. On October 24, 1929, the New York stock market crashed, plunging the world into the Great Depression. Orange City's bank closed its doors soon after. The hunger that plagued poor towns across America during the Depression wreaked havoc here. A 1931 letter to parents from Orange City Elementary School nurse Mildred Alexander bears witness to the hardships facing many during those years.
It will help us very much if you will make sure before sending your child to school that his eyes are not red or inflamed. If your child has any sores, see that they are covered. Also see that the child's throat is not sore, face is not flushed, and that he does not complain of pain. See that your child gets a good breakfast. A child that does not eat breakfast is not physically fit to attend school.
Well, most of the time we didn't have a dime during the Depression.
When the Great Depression hit Orange City in 1929, I talked to an old man that had 5 young ones. Orange City went bust. He said it was hard times in Orange City from 29 to 39. One of his children disappeared. But he said it was so bad that he said the community of Orange City ate all the squirrels, all the birds, all the turtles and gophers. He said we ate the turtles out of Orange City in that 10 years from 29 to 39, all the way to the river. He said it was the 1950s before you could really see squirrels again in Orange City. He said we ate them. Orange City went bust during the Great Depression.
Throughout the war years and those that followed, life in Orange City changed little. The town remained popular among winter retirees seeking a near-perfect climate. For 6 months out of the year, Orange City came alive. As for the other 6 months...
Well, about the 1st of April, it became a ghost town because everybody went back north. And they'd come back about the 1st of December and to their houses, and it became a bustling town again. But nobody wanted to live in Florida mostly then in the summer. There was one thing that made Florida. It wasn't Disney air conditioning.
No, I think originally it was kind of a small, typical small, laid-back southern Florida town that wasn't too interested in what was going on around it. I mean, that's the kind of impression I got. They were happy to be here off the beaten track.
In the early 1970s, the beaten track was bulldozed through Orange City when the state decided to widen the quaint 2-lane stretch of US 1792 the length of the town. Lacking the clout to stop the project, residents could only watch as rolling front lawns disappeared and surrounding spring-fed lakes, vital to the health and recreation of early life, were turned into drainage ponds.
About, 30 years ago, the state came through and took all the trees down that were across the front, widened the street, and built a new highway. It changed it altogether. And until then, it was a typical old-time town. They didn't realize, I don't believe the residents realized how much difference it was going to be.
We lived out in the country, should I say the boondock. And I was a tomboy. I used to climb trees, oh my God. My mom would be calling me and I'd be way up in the on the highest limb I could get on the mulberry tree. And however, I would eat bugs and all. And even imagine at that age, I was, I'd say 10 years old. We were very poor, and I used to go out and cut wood with an axe, and my mom was so afraid that I'd cut my feet off, but I didn't. And I do remember we used to have a farm. That was still young, because my father used to show me how to do corn, plant corn. He taught me all those things. But matter of fact, I was pretty much a loner, even at that age. Only the dog I had, that was my best friend. And I remember when I went uptown with my mom, I was younger than 10 then, and this train comes through Orange City, And I was frightened to death because I have never seen one before. And I clanged to Mama's around Mama to, you know, she said, honey, that's a train. And that thing was making some noise, I'll take it. Just, oh my goodness. And I looked and looked at it, and it comes from through Orange City on out through New Smyrna, on back around there somewhere. But that thing was so awful, and it was the biggest monster I've ever seen. So, in other words, when I was going to school, I was pretty much a loner. I didn't, like girls or whatever, like to gather up and giggle and carry on. I was off in a corner myself reading a book, because I felt that that did me more good than gossiping with those young girls. So my mom raised me up to be a good cook. She taught me well. And every chance I got, I had a favorite chair in the kitchen. And I'd sit there and I'd watch Mom. And Mom would call me to the stove. She said, honey, you do it this way, you do it that way. And there is nothing I don't know till this day about how to clean a house. I just done got old now, and I just don't do all that much housework. But anyway, we had some good times. We loved it one another. We had some good times. We'd get together and we'd sing gospel music. And we just, I don't know. But somehow, along the way, things began to get real rough. Imagine that, as young as I was, I remember the WPA, when they used to give out commodities for poor people. And you talking about times were bad, they were really bad. But my father used to go out, he used to go fishing. He used to go out kill rabbits. Now, I ate a lot of wild food at that time. And I used to do, even at a young age, we didn't have a wash machine. We'd have a bench out back, and 3 tubs would be on that bench. And my mom would help fill those tubs up. And at that time, people used to use bluing in the middle tub. I would wash my own clothes. And used to have these black pots out in the yard. And we used to boil clothes in that black pot, other than fry fish in there. Or either, we had a couple of hogs, and hog killing time, that was the best time of my life. When Mama would cook those cracklings up, honey, Mama stand up, she put her arms around me. She says, Liz, she said, you want some of those crackers? And I said, yes, ma'am. I was always been humble. She'd run in the house and get a bowl or something, and she'd come out with a spoon and she'd dip some of them out of there, and she'd put them in that bowl, and she'd put a little salt on them, and I'd wait till they cooled. And honey, I had a good time. But you know, deep down back there, we really had some good times. We, as I still say, we loved one another. And that made it all worthwhile. So, it seems as if it happened yesterday, you know, and I reminisce about the good times we had. I do that a lot. So, I wouldn't want to go back to that era. And you know, I wouldn't want to go back, and because we've had some rough times. I wouldn't want to go back to that era. I wouldn't want to do that.
But as always, the people of Orange City adapted to the changes brought by growth. And today, as Volusia County steps lightly into the 21st century, the still small community of Orange City retains its distinct identity. The DeYarman Hotel still serves as a temporary home to new settlers working to get on their feet. Northern retirees still come down every winter. the Shuffleboard Club remains as active as ever. Well-maintained 19th century homes help the town retain its historic sense of place. In the newer subdivisions west of town, working families continue to find affordable homes on generous-sized lots. Facing south, Orange City stands on the leading edge of an anticipated avalanche of eastward development spilling over from the Orlando metropolitan area. In recent years, hundreds of commercially zoned acres near Interstate 4, annexed by Orange City in the 1980s, have become home to a lively cluster of new restaurants, offices, and retail centers serving customers throughout southwest Volusia. The area's flora and fauna remain as breathtaking as when first studied by Samuel Parsons in 1855. Annual blooms bathe the town in vibrant colors. Majestic birds, including sandhill cranes, owls, and ospreys, aren't afraid to make homes down the street or forage for dinner on the nearest front lawn. And Blue Spring State Park, many years after its sale by the Thursby family, each year draws tens of thousands of visitors from all over the world to see the endangered manatee and its many other natural treats. Orange City's political scene in the American small-town tradition remains as vibrant as ever.
I move that this council terminates employment effectively.
Oh, yes. Come on, let's get out of here.
The politicking will likely never end here, but for most people, now and throughout Orange City's stormy history, the town is simply a peaceful, comfortable place to live. Not wealthy, not shabby, life is simple here. And after more than a century of struggle, Orange City not only survives, but thrives. And most of today's residents wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
I think we've done enough, don't you?